Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teaching Writing in College. I am Tom Skeen, and this podcast is about teaching writing in college. Of course, the driving question is, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? And now it is we're in a post-semester mode. I'm in a post-semester mode. And I've needed a little bit of time to get some grading done and do a few things with the kids as I get ready for summer. I've transitioned into a different role where I am thinking about the future, thinking about my classes that I will have in the fall, thinking about some things I would like to do. And then I'm also participating in other professional activities, including some scholarship and the podcast. I want to keep doing the podcast over the summer. I'll try to spend some time getting some episodes out just to kind of reflect on things and also to, consider some of the larger issues that are out there right now, like ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, and of course, lots of other topics that I'd like to cover in the podcast moving forward. One of those is the Elon statement on writing transfer. In a few previous episodes, I've been concentrating a lot on conceptual knowledge, which is one of the main recommendations, one of the main enabling practices that the Elon statement promotes. And so I want to make sure that we cover that really well. And I also want to get into practice, another important enabling practice from the Elon statement where students practice using concepts and skills, and then metacognition and so on. So I want to keep going through that. And along the way, I will try to tie it to other things that are happening in higher ed right now, and we'll just keep going. So anyway, today's episode, I thought I would just kind of put together a little bit of a reflection on what was going on toward the end of the semester. And it's not a very big one. It's a little bit spontaneous, but I would just like to show what I did during the last week of class. So the first thing I'd like to cover is what I did a few days before my students' final project, and then what I did on the last day of class, and then also a reflection on my teaching. So it's a metacognitive exercise for me as a teacher. One thing that I like to do, we're always talking about how do we help our students the most. And as I have been thinking about the Elon statement on writing transfer, and as I've used it in scholarship and as I've used it in my teaching, one thing that I've really come to appreciate about it is that it's not just for students. It's also for teachers or anybody really who needs to learn something. Conceptual knowledge, practice, metacognitive reflection, those are important for any learning. And of course, we're going to apply it to writing. So, and teaching writing, of course. And so to get started, English 106 is one of the classes. It's a first-year writing class at Grand Canyon University. A lot of students take it. It's English 2. It's our version of English 2 at GCU. And so this slide is just from, the PowerPoint that I used. I always start with a slide that just has the title of the course on it. And I started students out with this. It's just kind of an exercise that I ask students to do about my writing. One of the recommendations of the Elon statement is that instructors model what they want students to do. And, I've talked about a lot of skills. Students have practiced a lot of skills in class. And so I have this slide. The top of it, just for some explanation, it's almost kind of a class motto. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but what happens in English 106 happens everywhere else. I use that in all of my writing classes. I think, especially, freshmen, it's kind of an easy thing for them to remember, and I have them repeat it all the time, just because I think it's a really good way to kind of inculcate just the mindset that, whatever we're doing in this class is happening everywhere else, and they should expect to see it everywhere else. And so I, spend all semester, even just with little things like this. I would have taken this slide in class. I probably did this. I can't remember now because it's been a couple of weeks, but I almost always do this. If I put this motto or this quote on a slide, I always have them repeat it, and we just do it like a class motto. But the idea, of course, is that over the semester, they just know that that's really what the class is about. It's what they're doing everywhere else, including their majors, including, any anticipated career they might be going into, any writing that they might be doing with their friends or their loved ones on social media or wherever it is. We're looking for places where we're using these skills. And so that's what I did here. And it's kind of hard to see. And during class, I would zoom in. I don't know if I can here. I'm holding a microphone and it's hard to hold the mouse. But this is an outline of a book chapter that I've written. And one thing I like to do sometimes after I've got a bunch of material for a chapter, I like to kind of go through it paragraph by paragraph and just create a big outline so I can see what I'm doing. And so I made a copy of that and I brought it in to class, and I can zoom in on this and just ask them to take a look at it. So just a brief exercise here. It doesn't have to be a big one or a long one, but I just explained, I've got some revising to do. Each line represents a paragraph in my first chapter of a book, and I've probably talked to them about this before. I'm writing this outline to get an overview of what I've done so I know how to make it flow better. In other words, the skills we are learning don't just happen in English 106. As they know, they happen everywhere else. So what skill from English 106 do you think I could use to structure this better? And so in this case, I might zoom in and have them take just a brief look at it. And really what I'm fishing for is just to get them to name one of the skills that we've been learning and practicing all semester long. And that's part of what their participation is about. I would ask them just as an individual just to write down a brief answer to this question and just, maybe give them a minute or two to do that and just show them some of this material along the way. I'm going to try to zoom in on it here. I can't zoom in like I thought I could. I'm working with new software, so I'm still learning how to use it. Oops. And then just as a quick follow-up, also just for participation, just individually, it's just another opportunity to practice maybe one more time. And also at this point, I forgot to mention, they are about to turn in their last major project. And so this is meant kind of as a review for them. And so this is what I did a few days before my students' final project. And so after they do that, this exercise with my book chapter, then what I want them to do is just hopefully come up with the concept of familiar to unfamiliar, which I'll have to talk about sometime on the podcast. But it's about organization. It's about giving the audience something that they are familiar with before you give them new information. That's one of the ways that writing works. It's something that I adapted from the Ramage, Bean and Johnson, Allen and Bacon Guide to Writing. And I use it all the time because it's a really great principle for organizing writing. And so that's what it was about. And then I have them practice it here where I have taken a paragraph. You can see a reference to this article. This was a profile. And you can see that over there on the right-hand side. But what I did is I took some material from that and I scrambled it and asked them to just revise the excerpt by using that concept of familiar to unfamiliar. So the central question, and they should know this, by the end of the semester, is what information needs to come earlier in this passage so that other information makes sense to the reader later. So what does the reader have to be familiar with earlier so that new or unfamiliar information can be digested or comprehended by the audience better so they don't get confused. And so this is a really great strategy. It works with all kinds of writing, from recipes to comics to journal articles or texts or whatever it is. So I'd have them go through and just rewrite this. And sometimes to make it shorter, I might just number it and then have them rewrite the order of the numbers if I want to go faster. And then next, of course, is one of the main reasons why we were there today. It's to get ready for them to turn in their final project. And at this time, they've, done some peer reviewing, they've done some drafting, they've got, most of their project done. And the idea here is going to be to review what's been going on with that project. And so I have them create a numbered list, and then it's a self-assessment. And I cast it kind of as a true-false quiz, but I tell them it's not actually a quiz. But what you do is you answer true, false, or in between to some statements that I'm going to put on the screen. And true means that you have high confidence in your ability with a skill, because each question or each statement is about a skill that we've learned and how it applies directly to their current project. False means you don't understand it or you have little to no confidence with the skill. Or in between means that you are maybe uncomfortable with the skill, but you think you can do it, somewhere in between there. And then I just go ahead and start it. And I just have them go through these one at a time. There are about maybe 35 or so that I have, and they go fairly quickly. I just read them out loud and have the students answer. And then I put the PowerPoint up in the learning management system so that they can retrieve it later if they feel like they want to review. If they have some that are false, or if they have some that are in between and they want to review those and just remind themselves of what they were answering, they can do that. Do I have an 11 on there? I do. I was able to squeeze a lot onto this one slide. But then I have a few more slides of it. So that's what we did, the class period before their material was due. So their project was, at this point, due a couple of days later. Just another, one last review before they turn it in. One last self-assessment, I should say. And then another one that I had was, now this we're transitioning to the last day of class. And one thing I thought I would do there is just bring up Aristotle again, because one thing I really like about Aristotle and his very well-worn and famous quote about the available means of persuasion, I like the way that he casts it as the faculty or the capacity to discover. He doesn't say that it's the ability to persuade. He says it's the ability or the capacity or the faculty to discover in any given case the available means of persuasion. And so he's all about expanding one's capacities, which I really like. I think it fits really nicely with education in terms of, what can we add to a student's knowledge set or skill set so that they can use it later. So I really like that word capacity, and I talk about this every once in a while during the semester. I bring it in and just remind them that that's what we're doing. And so then we do some review at the end. So what was your capacity? I'm asking them your knowledge about writing before you started English 106. And I have them go back to a post that I had them put in the learning management system on the very first day of class. I asked them this question: what do you know about writing? What are your capacities right now? Those kinds of things. And I just have them go back in there and find that and review it a little bit and maybe just do a brief summary of what they said at the beginning from day one. Then after that, list all the skills and vocabulary you can remember from English 106. And so now it's about what they've gained in terms of their capacities. What do they remember from the course? What key concepts stand out to them, and so on and so forth. Then after that, I always ask them, do you want me to put stuff on the board? Do you want me to go through this too, so we can talk about all the things we've learned? And they say yes, and so I do. And so I go through and I list everything that I can remember that we've learned. And, I keep track of it in my head, of course. I keep track of it on a list, and I just kind of do it spontaneously here. But this is what I came up with this time. One thing that we spent a lot of time doing in English 106 is stasis theory. And so a lot of that is in there. But then lots of other things like summaries and narratives. Those are really great. Sort of mini genres that work with a lot of genres that students might use in the future. Genre, of course, probably the core or central concept. I've been talking to them about that all semester, about how that's the core concept. And we spent a lot of time doing what I like to call a rocks analysis on different genres. And I try to find real world ones that fit with whatever their majors are. I know what their majors are. I've asked them about that and kept lists of it. I've asked them about what they anticipate doing in their careers. And, if somebody says that they're going to be a nurse, I go out and I try to find different kinds of things that nurses would write, or I go try to find things that coders or IT professionals would write, or whoever it is, or whatever it is they're doing. And then all of the argument types, of course. I like to talk about evidence, and I bring that back quite a bit. We talk about Richard Fulkerson's STAR criteria, and they get comfortable with sufficiency, typicality, accuracy, and relevance, and how those are dependent on audience, so they can make judgments about evidence. Structure, familiar to unfamiliar, of course. And I've got several other structural strategies in there. Style, different things that could influence style. Park, proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast. That provides visual structure and helps guide readers' attention. This thing I call the penny principle, I'll have to introduce you to that sometime. That's about, most of the time, it's about citing sources and about finding their own model to follow. Just like if you try to draw a penny without a model to follow, you might not remember which way Abraham Lincoln's face is facing, or you might not remember where to place the year, or what motto is at the top, things like that. But if you do have a penny, you can replicate it pretty well. And so the same thing is true of citing sources in any format. So I use that instead of trying to teach APA directly. I use the penny principle to teach students to teach themselves, and I encourage them to go try other ones too. Like, I get a lot of students who come and say that they are well-versed in MLA because that's what was required in high school. And then I encourage them we try out APA. That's one that we use quite a bit on my campus. But then I also have them branch out and find ones that they would use, whether it's the American Medical Association or Chicago, or, whatever's related to their major, what they might use in their major. Technical writing, conveying technical information to various audiences. I like to have that in there because that happens, even if somebody isn't a technical writer per se. If you have any kind of specialized knowledge, even if it isn't technical, even if it's not about technology, if it's about business or it's about something else, I see all the time experts, having to convey that technical or sort of esoteric understanding to people who don't know as much. Presence from Perlman, I really like to use that one a lot, and that's really good for a lot of different kinds of writing. Conditions of learning, I like them to know about that. Those are from the Elon statement: conceptual knowledge, practice, metacognitive, and enabling disposition. We use that, because it gives purpose to what we do in class. So I like to, help them, just remind them that, you need to do this. You need to have conceptual knowledge if you're going to learn. And then we also apply it in their other classes. And so I don't just limit it to this. There will be times when in a writing course I will take some time out and have them review the conceptual knowledge they're learning in their other classes, or how they are practicing it, or how they can make a plan to practice it more. Have them reflect on their knowledge from those other classes and their knowledge of writing in those other classes, and so on. So that's a pretty good list. That's most of what we probably covered. And then I asked them the question, what's one question you have about what we've learned? And so, I'll take a minute to do a Q&A, and it's the last day of class, and so sometimes they're kind of quiet. But I like to ask questions like this too, just for some clarification for them, if they need it. And then I spend some time with them, and I give them some time just on their laptops to do this last thing. So pick a skill from our list, find an example of that skill in one of your English 106 projects or a project for another class. And so maybe they would pick something like a way that they used PARC, proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast, because sometimes in other classes they might have to, the assignment might be to do a brochure or something like that, and then they can use that. Put a comment on that project that highlights the example and defines the skill. So they go and they find something that's got that skill where they can see it, and then highlight that. Say, okay, here's the skill, and here's a definition of that skill, just so that they have it later. They have something that they can reference later for them. And then how do you carry this into the future? I give them a few minutes to create a folder or keep a folder with English 106 materials, and then all their other stuff too in there. Take pictures of your notes, because I do a lot of handwritten notes as well. They can take pictures of those and put it in the folder. Keep a list of our skills in your folder. collect projects from your classes, put notes about English 106 skills on them like we just did, and then give them an opportunity, number 5, if they think of an additional way in which they could maintain their material, then they could do that as well. And so I give them a minute just to get started on this, because it's kind of a comprehensive thing that takes a long time. And I'd like to just get them started on it. And then another reflection briefly. How have your capacities, your knowledge about writing, and your ability to use that knowledge expanded in the last 15 weeks or so? Just 1 or 2 sentences just to sort of contrast that with what they said at the beginning of the semester, because now they've had a chance to look at what they've done. They have a chance to see the skills we've learned and to see how they've applied them in various places. Just a couple of sentences there. And then one time, again, I didn't actually do this one, but sometimes individual practice. Remember all the vocabulary you can from your other classes too. I like to, tell them, look, your other classes are important. My class is important, of course, and so are all of your other classes. I want you to be successful in all of them. So what can you remember from those classes as you're getting ready for exams or whatever? And thank them for a great semester, and away we go. So the third thing I wanted to cover for this episode of Teaching Writing in College is just a reflection of my own as an instructor, and what did I do? What would I do better next time? So there's the list again. But one thing that I think I would like to do is bring more about commonplaces from their disciplines in, because common places are really important, just common ways of thinking, common things that people say about things. That's really kind of one of the ways to learn about the discipline. It's one of the inroads into whatever kinds of writing are being done and whatever kinds of knowledge they need to have. And so just kind of keeping track of what's going on in those other disciplines is really important. What are some of the hot topics right now? What do people commonly believe about XYZ, whatever they're going into, whether it's psychology or medicine or sociology or history or whatever's going on. What's going on in their discipline right now? What are some of the common beliefs by people outside the discipline, and maybe also, and then of course people inside the discipline. Another one I'd like to spend more time with for the rhetorical analysis at the beginning of the year, in English 1, which is English 105 at GCU. We do a rhetorical analysis every year, and I've taught that a lot. But one thing that I think I could still do to improve it is to spend more time with them on commonplaces, doxa, audience. What is the audience bringing to the table? That's really important, I think, in a rhetorical analysis. And I'm always prompting them and pushing them to think about that as they're actually doing their analysis, and to include that kind of thinking in their analysis. But I think I could organize that better and give it a term. So doxa, commonplaces, something along those lines. Maybe create an audience profile. That's an area that I feel like I need to strengthen. And it wasn't in the material we just covered from my class, but I'm just thinking about what I did earlier in the year. Additional outside genres from the future they see for themselves. I did spend a lot of time this semester working on that, and I brought lots of them in because I want them to feel like there's a connection between what we're doing in class and what they see themselves doing. I think that's really important for them to have that connection for the purpose of motivation, just for the purpose of learning generally. Oh, here's how I can use this. And so that, I think, is an important thing to continue to do. I did quite a bit, but I want to do more. One thing I do, like I think I mentioned earlier, is I keep track of their majors and their future careers that they see themselves in. And I keep lists of that so that I can then go just find as many as I can, because, lots of different students will be going and doing lots of different things, and there will be lots of different kinds of writing. And so just bringing in something, for everyone, trying to find something that represents, different cohorts, different groups of students is really helpful. I also would like them to make their own textbook. That's something I've thought about before. But what I mean by that, it would take place gradually through participation, and it would consist of a master list of terms and examples. So what I imagine doing, because at GCU, we have a curriculum that every instructor follows for a particular course. So in English 106 that I just showed you, that was me helping them meet requirements for the common assignments we have. And we have those because the university is, keeping track of student progress. And if everybody's teaching the same assignment, we can do that. And so that's why GCU does that. And so we've got 3 major projects in English 106, but we don't have a portfolio. And, I've done portfolios before, of course, in my career, and they can be useful. And I think there's still kind of a way to do it. If I, during the semester, am working with participation, because all the classes have participation credit, and I get to kind of decide how to do that. One thing that I can do is I can have them keep a list of the material that we are covering, definitions of the terms, and I can have them do that by date so that they have kind of a master list of all our terms. And then they also have notes that go along with that. And so if they learned about proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast, or if they learned about the STAR criteria on a given day, they'll have some notes, and there will be a date for that. And there will probably be a piece of material where I had them practice, like with Park, since that's about visual structure. Maybe I show them a, something like a dictionary entry or a tweet, just a small genre that's easy to work with in the classroom, and just have them sort of recreate that and maybe label all of the parts just by hand. Proximity, here's an example of proximity, here's an example of alignment, here's an example of repetition, and here's an example of contrast. And so if I'm doing that consistently through the semester, and I use activities like that for participation credit, and I make sure that it's in their hands, and they are just kind of keeping a notebook full of material like that, which a lot of them do, since I do a lot of things by hand, I can get them to create kind of a textbook that just has examples of things that they did. They can put metacognitive reflections in there, which I also do during class, like I showed you. Sometimes it's just a few sentences. Sometimes I might ask them to write, a 50 or 75 word paragraph about something that we've been learning. And they can compile all of that, just keep it all in one spot so that it's easy for them to access later. And then they've got their own textbook with examples of things we've done in writing. And they can also supplement that with the major projects that they did, and so on and so forth. So I think that would also help them carry it into the future a little bit better. And that would be my way of doing it, simply through participation credit, which I think would benefit them. So I think that's all I have for this episode. I really appreciate having you watch or listen on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. And like I said, I'd like to keep doing it through the summer to just kind of keep the momentum going. And part of it's just me kind of thinking through what I'm going to do next year. Part of it is me going through the Elon statement. And part of it's me reacting to things that are happening in higher ed right now. So ChatGPT is a big one. I'd like to continue to cover that. I've done a couple of episodes on that already. If you haven't heard those, you're welcome to go back and take a look. I also, would like to cover other kinds of things. There's a lot in news in higher education right now about things like student motivation or belonging or a sense of belonging and things of those nature. And when I see articles about those in somewhere like the Chronicle of Higher Ed or on a podcast like EdSurge or something like that, it gets me thinking. And at time permitting, I think I'll spend some time reflecting on that and how that might apply to teaching writing. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will sign off for now. And in my next episode, I'd like to do some more with ChatGPT. I'd like to start thinking about that, mainly because, one thing that's really important about writing is that, in a writing class, students shouldn't just be learning to write. That's not really what the goal is. Students should be learning about writing. Writing is a discipline just like any other discipline that you can think of, and it's got a vocabulary just like any other discipline that you can think of. And so having students learn about that is really important for their long-term use of skills that they might learn in college when it comes to writing. So I'm going to keep covering that. And that idea of not teaching students to write, but rather teaching them about writing, comes from a really important article by Doug Downs and Elizabeth Wardle back in about 2007, I think, if I remember right. I've got it set up for I think my next podcast episode, I'll talk about it more, but a really important one. And I think about that all the time. It's not really that I'm teaching students to write. It's I'm teaching them about writing, and that's why I spend so much time with them on this vocabulary and then also practicing it. So anyway, thanks once again, and I will sign off for now, but I will see you next time.